Hey, thanks for jumping into Leanne On Demand today. Today, I want to talk about the 4Ps of panel hosting. I created this framework as I was trying to re-engineer my process for hosting a panel that I've got on this Saturday for the Brisbane Raw. I'm really excited about it. And so I just thought I'd share my approach to that. Now, with this approach, it is a framework. So there's some areas that you might over-index on or do less of. For me, I am kind of doing a bit probably more thorough research than I usually would because I just maybe am putting additional pressure on myself, but also I want to make it great. And it's something that I'm really aligned to. Like I really love the Brisbane Raw. So I've got like a personal connection to this as well. So these 4 C's are philosophy is number 1, 2 is preparation, 3 is the pre-briefing, and 4 is performance. So the first 3 stages all happen before you even get there. So I guess that's a real cool up there. 75% of the work in terms of hosting a panel is done before you're even at the event. Really in that sort of behind the scenes work. The performance part is in the moment, but if you do these other 3 steps really well, it'll make that performance part a ton easier. So let's kick off with number 1, philosophy. So this is really around what makes a panel effective. I think you want to consider the values that guide a great discussion. I think balance is important. So balancing different points of view, open-mindedness, and a focus on the audience's interests, not just yours, like who is actually going to the event. I think it's good to establish a vision for the panel that outlines the purpose and desired outcomes. So our topic that we chose for this one is we're exploring the speed of decision making. At this event, it's called the Brisbane Raw in Business. So we've got sponsors that are going to be there, leaders within business, also Raw fans. The reason I selected that topic was looking at overcoming things like the hesitation station, but when have the players that I'm talking to made a quick decision? How do they deal with that in terms of confidence or maybe even potential backlash when you make a bold, quick decision? What times in their career have speedy decisions, been a make or break situation? And I want to hear definitely both sides of that. So the philosophy as well, I mean, just even from an audience member's perspective, here are some things that I hate when I listen to a panel. One is panelists that just continue to talk for a long period of time and don't really have any direction. So they kind of wander around. I really dislike it when the host asks a question. Let's just say there's 3 panelists. Panelist A responds, panelist B responds, panelist C responds. Then the host asks second question, A, B, C. Third question, A, B, C. And there's very limited interaction. It's just that each panelist is talking basically to the host. I think you miss a really powerful dynamic there of the interplay between panelists as well. So there's 2 over-talkative panelists, predictable questions or a predictable rhythm of the panel, and maybe even a lack of audience input as well. Like I'm there, otherwise I could just watch them on video or listen to them on a podcast. Like what is the point of having a live audience there? Can we ask some questions as well? Getting some interaction. And I also think the lack of diverse perspectives. So if every panelist gives the same answer or basically reframes what the previous person says, it's like there's no point in them speaking up. It's like, yeah, cool, I agree. And you can move on. You don't have to add any more. And so sometimes I've been a guest panelist where the predictable formats happened and it's come to me and I'm like, look, I've got nothing else to add here. And I just said that and it was fine. So setting that expectation for the people that you invite onto your panel is really quite important. Okay, the second stage is the preparation. So this involves any research and planning from your end, understanding the topic, choosing the topic, selecting knowledgeable panelists. In this situation, I haven't picked the panelists, the Raw did, and they've told me who they are, and I know all 3 of them, not personally, but just through their reputation. And AI is really great at the heavy lifting in terms of the preparation. So I did some research on each of the panelists, but then I also did other things like outside of that. Wayne Dyer wrote the book, It's Never Crowded Along the Extra Mile. I don't need to read the book to understand the premise of that book. I tend to go a little bit overboard with this. I spent a bit of time. I actually found it quite interesting, reading up a bit more about them, hopping onto YouTube, doing a search, listening to their style on podcasts. Because when you hear that, you're like, oh, I've got a sense of what this person is like, whether they'll be able to catch maybe a question that I throw at them, just understanding like their ability and cadence to respond and to build up the familiarity in your own mind. So when you meet them, it kind of feels like you are peers already. So that's what I did. And also as part of the preparation stage, that's when I craft biographies for them, introductions, and I want to keep it sharp, but I also want to highlight some really cool things about them. One of the panelists is Matt Mackay. He's played over 274 games. He holds a club record for the most amount of appearances for the Brisbane Roar. This event is being held at Suncorp Stadium, so I'm going to make some type of remark that he must feel at home at Suncorp Stadium. It's relevant to where we are, the timing. It's relevant for the moment. The other thing, something I've done in the past when I work with really high achieving people is when I introduce them, like for the Matt Mackay example, I could say between Matt Mackay and I, we have represented the Raw 274 times, just joke about my connection, which is obviously zero, but it's just like an evergreen joke that you can use with any panelist, but it connects you to the content. So I do spend a bit of time crafting that. Now I'm going a bit above and beyond with this one for sure. I would love to memorize these bios. So what I've done is yesterday I recorded the bios, I printed them out, and I've got my private podcast where I'm just going to listen to myself doing the introduction just to like hammer into my mind the specific parts of that. I've included the whole introduction to the topic as well as part of that. Again, you don't need to do this, and I don't really ever do this often. So that's the prep stage. Then the third part is the pre-briefing. So this is really around connecting to the panelists. Now, I'm not directly reaching out to them, which is fine because they're going through the Brisbane Roar, and I completely respect that. And my contact at the Roar has been brilliant. Like, so I've sent her a prep email. Sometimes I'll do a Loom video about like, hey, just a quick one. This is how we're going to run it. And just sharing, hey, this is how much time we've got. Here are some key questions that I'll ask, but we definitely will go with the flow as well. And do let me know if there's a particular question on this that you would really like to answer, because I'm not going to throw every question to all of you. So I've made that very clear up front. And something I've also shared with them is like, hey, this is how it's going to run. I'm going to introduce you. And if there's a specific project or business thing or something that's on your mind that you'd like for me to mention, just reach out. I also try to explore social media profiles, because that really shows you, a website is good, but the most current thing I find is on social media in terms of what they're talking about. I've shared the questions that we'll be talking through. I've shared the vibe, back to that movie, The Castle, the vibe of the thing, and really just shared, hey, this is a relaxed, engaging chat. It's not an interrogation, but at the same time, different viewpoints equals a better panel. Feel free to challenge ideas or bring a different perspective. It makes for a much livelier discussion, and I, as your host, will be able to balance that. I've just made that clear up front. I've said if audience Q&A and timing allows it, we'll open up for a couple of questions from the audience, and here are my contact details in case anything else shows up. Yeah, so that's the pre-briefing in terms of that. And then on the day is stage number 4. This is like the final 25% is the actual performance. And so my role is to keep the conversation engaging and on track. I'm going to be there both from a host perspective, but I'm also going to try and be empathetic and put myself in the listener's shoes and just like to see what the vibe is of the conversation, where it's going. If we need to maybe double click on a point that someone's raising or not. And this is where the facilitation skills come in really handy in terms of being comfortable with maybe interrupting or moving it back on track, using nice segueing techniques to make sure things are linked seamlessly. And just creating that dynamic and making sure that you're also timekeeper as well. So there's many different things that you have to do in that role. I think the performance part is also catching up with each individual panelist beforehand, just checking in with them, not in a huge way, just like, hey, just making sure you're okay. What questions do you have? Let's have a great time out there. Really can't wait to hear your perspective. And I think just going in with that natural curiosity from even like a podcast hosting perspective in terms of, I don't know how they're going to respond. And that's the beauty of it, because that'll keep me on my toes, and I'll probably go down and ask a follow-up question that aligns to that. But also, again, really try to promote, hey, like so-and-so said this, hey, Jade, you've had a different perspective. I've seen you've played over in Korea. What was that like? So just being able to fall back on that research, seeing what their background is, and then going, the reason I'm going to you next is because this has been part of your playing history or your career as well. And that's my 4-part framework. Let me know what you think in terms of that. You might find this useful, or you might want to share this episode with someone else that's hosting a panel. And if you're listening to this thinking, oh my gosh, that's like so much to do. Yeah, it is actually. And sometimes it does take that effort if you want to make it. I could just wing it and rock up and I'm sure it'll be pretty good, but I want to get the best from the panelists too. Like, they've got 3 unbelievable people actually, who I'm so excited to learn from as well. So that's basically how I run it. In the meantime, with this type of event, there's food and drink going on in the background. We've got like the encore, like the crowd announcements for the game. So there's going to be quite a few factors to consider, but I think it's going to be really fun. And the reason I do this, like this over preparation, is so that I then can relax. It actually helps me relax prior to the event too. Cool. Hope you enjoyed this one. Hope you found it helpful, and I'll speak to you tomorrow.